He was only 16, full of dreams, music in his headphones, and hope in his heart. Xavier wasn't breaking any law. He was just walking home from basketball practice. But in a world where skin color can turn innocence into suspicion, one routine stop became something far more dangerous. The flashing lights, the harsh voice, the hand on the holster, it all happened in seconds. What followed would not only change Xavier's life, but shake an entire courtroom to its core. Because this time, the truth wouldn't be silenced. This time, everyone would see what really happened. Xavier was the kind of kid everyone in the neighborhood knew, polite, focused, and always smiling. At 16, he was the first in his family to make the honor roll 3 years in a row. He loved basketball, sneakers, and sketching city skylines in his notebook. His mom worked nights as a nurse, and Xavier had learned early what responsibility meant. Every evening, he made sure his little sister finished her homework before heading out to the court down the street. A place that felt like freedom. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just chasing his dream. A college scholarship, maybe even a shot at something bigger. To his friends, Xavier was the calm one, the kid who avoided drama and believed that if you did the right thing, life would treat you fairly. But that belief was about to be tested. It was a cool Friday evening, the kind of night that smelled like rain and asphalt. The city lights shimmered off puddles as Xavier slung his gym bag over his shoulder and started the walk home. He had his headphones in, hoodie up, music low enough to still hear the world around him. He'd taken that route 100 times, past the closed corner store, across the quiet intersection, down the stretch where streetlights flickered like old memories. But this time felt different. A police cruiser sat idling near the curb, its engine humming low, headlights cutting through the darkness. Xavier didn't think much of it. Why would he? He wasn't breaking the law. He was just a kid heading home. But as the cruiser's door opened and footsteps echoed behind him, Xavier's quiet evening began to unravel, one heartbeat at a time. The sound of boots on wet pavement made Xavier pause. He turned down his music, tugging one earbud out, just in time to hear a sharp voice cut through the night. "Hey, stop right there!" He froze. The police officer's tone wasn't curious. It was commanding. Xavier turned slowly, hands visible, just like his mom had always told him. The officer's flashlight sliced through the dark, landing directly on Xavier's face. "What are you doing out here?" the officer demanded. Xavier blinked, confused. "Just walking home from practice, sir." But his calm voice didn't matter. The officer's hand hovered near his holster. Another patrol car pulled up, tires hissing against the wet street. 2 more officers stepped out, their radios crackling, their expressions unreadable. Xavier could feel his pulse in his throat. He wasn't guilty of anything, but in that moment, innocence didn't feel like protection. One officer circled him slowly, muttering something about a suspect in a gray hoodie. Xavier's hoodie was blue, but that didn't seem to matter either. "Empty your pockets," one said. "Keep your hands where I can see them," another barked. The cold air bit at his skin as he fumbled to comply, his phone slipping from his shaking hands onto the pavement. It hit the ground with a sharp crack that echoed louder than it should have. A small crowd began to form. Neighbors, strangers, faces lit by the glow of streetlights and phone screens. Someone whispered, "He didn't do anything." Another said, "They're recording." But the officers didn't stop. They searched his bag, his pockets, his shoes, every motion heavy with suspicion. When they found nothing instead of relief, came humiliation. One officer smirked, muttering, "Watch yourself next time." The words stung more than the cold metal of the cuffs that had grazed his wrists. Xavier felt anger rise in his chest, not the kind that lashes out, but the kind that burns quietly, deep inside. He wanted to speak, to demand why, but one look at the officer's hand on his weapon reminded him to stay silent. Because here, silence was safety. By the time they let him go, his legs trembled. He picked up his cracked phone, the screen still recording without him realizing. The video had caught it all. The tone, the aggression, the humiliation. He didn't know it then, but that recording would become the spark that lit everything that followed. That night, he walked home slower than ever. The city didn't feel the same. Every flashing light felt like a threat, every shadow a warning, and yet, beneath the fear, something else stirred. Resolve. Because when injustice breaks you open, you either shatter or you rise, and Xavier was about to rise in a way no one saw coming. The video spread faster than Xavier could process. By morning, his name was everywhere. Headlines, hashtags, and talk shows. Some called him brave, others called him a liar. But the footage didn't lie. It showed everything. The aggression, the fear, the humiliation. What should have been a quiet night had turned into a national debate. The police department issued a statement claiming proper procedure was followed. But the world saw otherwise. The community rallied. Marches filled the streets, and people demanded accountability. Yet Xavier, still just a teenager, felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Weeks later, the case reached court. Cameras flashed outside as Xavier walked in with his mother by his side. He wasn't there as a criminal, but the way some looked at him, you wouldn't know it. Across the room sat the officer, calm, collected, dressed in uniform as if the badge itself could wash away what had happened. The prosecutor played the video on a large screen. The courtroom fell silent. The officer's words echoed, cold, commanding, dismissive. The footage showed Xavier's hands raised, his voice steady, his fear undeniable. It was more than evidence. It was truth made visible. When the video ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Even the judge's expression had changed, from formal distance to quiet disbelief. Then came the officer's defense. Excuses wrapped in authority. Justification hidden behind standard procedure. But this time, it didn't work. The world was watching. The truth had already been seen. When the verdict was finally read, Xavier's heart raced. Not out of vengeance, but hope. The officer was found guilty of misconduct and abuse of authority. Gasps filled the courtroom. Tears welled in his mother's eyes. For the first time, Xavier felt something that had been missing since that night. Validation. Not revenge, but recognition. Because this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about proving that his dignity was real, his pain was valid, and his story mattered. And yet, deep down, he knew this victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something larger. A fight far from over. The courtroom emptied slowly that day. Cameras faded, reporters moved on, and the noise of justice settled into silence. But for Xavier, nothing would ever be the same again. He went back to his school, back to his court, back to the life he knew. But it didn't feel the same. The streets that once felt ordinary now carried echoes of that night. Every flashing light, every patrol car passing by still made his chest tighten. Healing wasn't instant. It came in moments. In his mother's smile, in his sister's laughter, in the quiet knowledge that he had spoken truth and been heard. Weeks later, the city council invited him to speak. He didn't prepare a speech. He didn't need one. When he stood in front of that crowd, all he said was, "I was scared." But silence never fixes what fear creates. Those words spread farther than his video ever had. Schools started discussions about racial profiling. Police departments revisited their training. His story became a spark. Not because he wanted attention, but because he wanted change. Xavier never saw himself as a hero. He was just a kid who wanted to go home. But life had forced him to become something more. A reminder that even in a world that tries to silence you, truth still finds its way to speak. Years later, people still talk about the Xavier case. Some remember the verdict. Others remember the video. But what mattered most was what came after. The conversations, the awareness, the small changes that began to ripple through a broken system. Because racism doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, in judgmental glances, in unfair stops, in the moments no one records. And maybe that's the question we're all left with. How many more Xaviers will it take before justice doesn't have to be fought for, but simply lived? Don't miss more powerful real-life stories. Hit subscribe now.